The ground shook beneath them, a violent tremor that threatened to crack the concrete beneath their feet. Commander Lila Vega stood tall, her face set in stone, her eyes locked on the holographic display flickering in front of her. The map of the galaxy spread before her, a chaotic mess of blinking red dots and flashing icons. Every one of those dots was an alien warship, a silent reminder of humanity's position in the universe. Lila had led the human forces through countless battles, but this was different. The tournament. It was supposed to be their moment of glory. Their chance to prove that humanity was a force to be reckoned with, a chance to earn their place among the stars. Instead, they had been told to stay out. They were too strong, too dangerous for the games. The alien races had agreed on one thing: humanity was too much of a threat to be allowed into the tournament. The brutal competition to determine the strongest species in the galaxy had no place for a race that could annihilate everyone else with ease. So, the humans had become the prize instead. Lila clenched her fists as the message replayed in her mind. Humanity is banned from the tournament. You are too powerful. Too unpredictable. However, the tournament will proceed as planned, and humanity will be the reward. A cold laugh escaped her lips. Too strong to enter, they feared humanity, and that fear would be their undoing. Her comms beeped, a sharp reminder that the war never stopped. Commander Vega, came the voice of General Mathis, his tone formal, as always. We've just received a transmission from the Confederation Council. They want to know how you plan to proceed. The tournament organizers are waiting. Tell them to wait, Lila growled, her eyes narrowing as she stepped away from the holographic table, pacing slowly. The council can wait. We've got bigger problems. Mathis didn't respond immediately, a slight hesitation in his voice. Understood. But Commander, we need a decision. The tournament starts in 12 hours. If we do nothing, humanity will be nothing more than an object of their amusement. Lila's jaw tightened. She knew exactly what the council wanted. They wanted her to play their game, to accept the challenge and fight for humanity's honor. But Lila was no puppet. She wasn't about to let humanity's worth be decided by some galactic spectacle. What's the situation on the front lines? She asked, cutting through the tension. The transmission paused. A fleet of alien mercenaries is advancing on the outer colonies. They've heard about the tournament, and they're starting to take action. The tournament organizers have made it clear that if we refuse to play by their rules, we're fair game. Lila stopped pacing, her eyes narrowing as the weight of their reality settled in. It wasn't just about the tournament anymore. This was about survival. The aliens had seen humanity's potential, and they were going to make sure that potential was either crushed or bent to their will. We won't be their prize, Lila muttered, her fingers tapping against her sidearm. We're going to show them what happens when you underestimate humanity. It was hours later when the call came in, a cryptic warning from an unknown source. The message was brief but clear. Asterisk. You're being hunted. Asterisk. Lila's heart skipped a beat. They had known humanity was a threat, but this was something new. Whoever sent the message had knowledge of their every move, their tactics, their weaknesses. Lila looked at the data, her mind working fast. This wasn't a simple warning. It was a threat. A challenge. She turned to her command staff. We've been targeted. The tournament isn't the only game in town. Someone wants humanity as the prize, but they're not playing by anyone's rules. The room fell silent. Everyone knew the implications. Humanity had no allies. No one would risk everything for their survival. If they wanted to stay alive, they would have to fight, and fight smart. What's the plan, Commander? Lieutenant Harris asked, his voice laced with urgency. The tournament, the mercenaries, and now this? We're outnumbered. Lila's eyes flicked to the map once more, her mind racing. She had to make a decision, ****. There was no room for error. No more time to waste. The first step is to hit them where it hurts, she said, her voice cold and commanding. We'll force their hand. If they want humanity as the prize, then they'll have to pay for it. She turned to Harris. Get the fleet ready. We're taking the fight to the tournament organizers. The operation was set into motion immediately. Lila's fleet, a small but heavily armed force, was positioned on the outskirts of the galaxy, just outside the tournament's reach. The tournament's organizers, alien species who had long ruled the galaxy's most brutal competition, believed they could control humanity by keeping them out. But Lila was about to show them how wrong they were. As the fleet moved toward its objective, Lila stood at the helm of the flagship, watching the stars streak past them as they entered hyperspace. She wasn't just leading this mission for herself, she was doing it for every human who had been oppressed, every life that had been silenced by alien hands. A message blinked onto her console. It was from the tournament organizers, a simple statement, **. Humanity's actions are unacceptable. You will comply, or face the consequences. **. Lila's lips curled into a grim smile. Tell them I'm already in the tournament. I'm just going to be the one deciding who the real prize is. Hours later, the human fleet arrived at the tournament's central arena, a sprawling space station surrounded by thousands of alien warships. The hum of energy coursed through the air, the tension palpable. Lila's fleet was small compared to the alien forces, but it was fast, and it was ruthless. We're in, Harris reported, his voice crackling with excitement. They never saw us coming. Lila's eyes were fixed on the massive station ahead. The tournament was about to begin, but this time, humanity wouldn't be the prize. They would be the ones deciding who would walk away victorious. She turned to her crew, her voice resolute. Prepare for the assault. We'll show the galaxy that humanity doesn't just play the game, we rewrite the rules. The human fleet plunged forward into the heart of the alien forces, ready to make their stand. This was more than a fight for survival, it was the beginning of humanity's reign. The stars outside the window of the command deck of the Vanguard were a blur of streaking light as the ship plunged through hyperspace. Lila Vega stood at the center of the room, her hands clasped behind her back, her eyes locked on the holographic map before her. The alien tournament station loomed just beyond their reach, but Lila's thoughts were elsewhere. The battle ahead would be unlike any they had ever fought. Commander, Harris's voice cut through her thoughts, pulling her back to the present. The fleet is ready. We're 3 hours out from the station. We're operating under the assumption that they have no idea we're coming. Lila nodded, but her mind was already racing ahead. The plan was simple: slip through the alien defenses, disable their main communication arrays, and cause enough chaos to make the tournament organizers rethink their plans. It was a daring move, and Lila knew that the odds of success were slim. But in her experience, humanity thrived in the impossible. The hum of the ship's engines vibrated through the deck as the Vanguard dropped out of hyperspace, emerging into real space. The tournament station was massive, more a city than a station, its imposing spires rising like jagged teeth in the dark expanse of space. Alien ships of various designs and sizes were stationed around it, their energy shields flickering with raw power. They don't know we're here yet, Harris said, his voice tight with anticipation. Not for long, Lila replied, her voice steady as she turned toward the tactical console. Lieutenant, get me a communication link with the fleet. Right away, Commander. Lieutenant Soren's fingers flew over the console as the communication channel buzzed to life. Attention all units. Lila's voice rang through the fleet. We are about to make history. The aliens think they can play God with our future. Well, we'll show them what happens when humanity is backed into a corner. We fight, and we fight to win. For every man, woman, and child they've oppressed. For every life they've destroyed. She paused, letting her words sink in, feeling the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. Prepare for battle. We hit fast. We hit hard. And we don't stop until they beg for mercy. The response was immediate. A wave of cheers and affirmations crackled through the comms. Lila felt a surge of pride. Her people were ready. They would show these alien races exactly what humanity was capable of. The Vanguard moved silently through the alien fleet, its hull designed for stealth and speed. They were ghosts in the darkness, slipping past the advanced radar systems of the tournament organizers. The alien ships, oblivious to the human presence, continued their patrols. The seconds felt like hours as Lila's heart raced. The stakes had never been higher. "Commander, we're approaching the first communication relay station," Harris reported. "We'll be in range in less than 5 minutes." Lila's jaw clenched. This was the most critical moment of the mission. The relay station was the backbone of the tournament's communication network. If they could disable it, they would cripple the aliens' ability to coordinate their forces. It was their best shot at destabilizing the entire operation. "On my mark," Lila said. "We move in and make it quick. We don't wait for confirmation. We act first." A few tense moments passed before she gave the signal. "Now." The fleet descended on the relay station with surgical precision. Fighters detached from the main ships, weaving through space like deadly wasps. Lila's flagship launched a barrage of EMP missiles at the relay station, sending a pulse of energy that flooded the station's systems. The lights on the station flickered, and a massive shockwave rippled outward as its shields faltered. "Relay station down," Harris confirmed, his voice a mixture of pride and urgency. "We've got their attention now." Lila didn't have time to savor the victory. "Stay sharp, everyone," she ordered. "They know we're here. Prepare for counterattack." Just as she spoke, the first wave of alien ships burst out of the shadows, their weapons lighting up like blazing comets. Lila's heart skipped a beat. The battle had begun. The clash was immediate. Lila's fleet, though smaller, was more agile and well-coordinated. They had the advantage of surprise, and that was all they needed. But the alien forces were vast. Dozens of ships surrounded the vanguard, their energy weapons crackling with deadly power. Lila could see the unmistakable shapes of the alien warships, their sleek designs designed for both offense and defense. They had no intention of going down easily. "We're taking fire!" Soren called out from the tactical station. "Shields are holding, but for how long?" "Get us closer to the station," Lila barked. "We need to keep them occupied. No retreat." Her orders were met with swift action. The vanguard lurched as the crew worked tirelessly to navigate the chaos of the battlefield. Ships exploded in the distance as the human fleet tore into the alien lines, fighters weaving in and out of combat like dancers in a deadly ballet. Lila's eyes darted from one screen to the next as she watched the carnage unfold. Her soldiers were fighting with everything they had. But it wasn't enough. The alien forces were too numerous, too well equipped. And the tournament organizers were only just beginning to fight back. "We've got incoming!" Harris shouted from the communications station. A massive alien ship, far larger than anything they had seen so far, was emerging from behind the tournament station. Its weapons glowed with an ominous energy. Lila's stomach dropped. This was no ordinary ship. This was the tournament's final champion, the ship that represented the elite of the galaxy's most feared species. If they didn't stop it now, everything they had fought for would be in vain. "Brace for impact!" Lila yelled, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "All ships, engage that vessel with everything we've got!" The final battle had begun. The human fleet was outgunned, but they had one thing the aliens could never take from them: the will to fight. As the massive alien ship closed in, Lila's resolve hardened. "We either win this or die trying," she muttered to herself. "And I don't plan on dying today." The ship shook as the alien ship fired its first devastating blast. The shockwave rattled through the vanguard, but Lila stood firm, her eyes locked on the battle unfolding in front of her. "Hold together," she whispered, her fists clenched. "This is humanity's moment." The universe seemed to hold its breath as the vanguard barreled toward the alien flagship, the massive vessel casting a long shadow over the battlefield. Lila Vega's pulse thundered in her ears, each beat reminding her of how far they had come, and how far they had yet to go. "Commander, they're closing in fast," Harris said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We're locked in. The flagship is targeting us." Lila's eyes locked on the tactical screen. The alien flagship, a colossal ship adorned with dark, twisted energy conduits, loomed ahead like a harbinger of doom. Its weapons crackled with malevolent power, energy beams lashing out to tear through the ranks of the human fleet. She could feel the weight of their desperation, the weight of every human life that had been risked, resting on her shoulders. "Not yet," Lila muttered under her breath, staring at the swirling chaos of the battlefield. Her mind raced as she considered their dwindling options. The alien flagship was their only real threat now. If they could disable it, the rest of the alien forces would fall apart. If they failed, humanity would fall with them. The vanguard was still in one piece, but barely. Shields were down to 30%, and the hull was scorched with the marks of enemy fire. Every moment they spent in this fight brought them closer to the edge of annihilation. "We need to get closer," Lila snapped. "Full speed ahead, evasive maneuvers. Don't give them a clean shot." Her crew moved swiftly, knowing exactly what to do. The ship lurched as it veered, avoiding another deadly blast that would have torn them apart. The alien flagship unleashed another volley, but Lila was already 2 steps ahead. She knew what needed to be done. She had to cripple the flagship's power core before it could bring its full firepower to bear. "Harris, prepare the secondary charge. We're going for their core." Lila's voice was unwavering, despite the tension knotting in her gut. "We're too close, Commander," Harris warned. "One wrong move, and we'll be vaporized before we can even set it off." "We don't have the luxury of time," Lila replied, her gaze unwavering as she clenched her fist. "They're trying to crush us under the weight of their numbers. We fight smarter or we die." The final moments seemed to stretch into eternity. The vanguard shuddered violently as it barely dodged a barrage from the flagship. Lila's jaw clenched as she reached for the comms. "All units, form a wedge! Get to the flagship's blind spot and deploy every last fighter. We need to disable that core, or we're all dead." Her command rang out clear and fierce, but her mind was already on the next step. She needed to get inside the flagship. The core was deep within its center, surrounded by heavily defended corridors and automated turrets. Getting in would be a suicide mission, but she had no choice. The vanguard shuddered again, and Lila's eyes flashed with determination. "We're going in. This is the endgame. No more running. If we're going down, we'll make sure they remember who we are." The vanguard made its final, desperate plunge toward the flagship. Fighters launched from the ship's hangar in a furious storm of fire and fury. Lila's hands moved with practiced precision, guiding the ship through a final, lethal maneuver. They reached the flagship's surface, and as the alien fleet closed in around them, Lila's heart pounded. "We're in," Harris confirmed. "Locking onto the core. Activate the secondary charge," Lila ordered, her voice calm but fierce. "Now." The ship's interior hummed with energy as the charge was primed. The countdown clock on Lila's screen flickered, 10 seconds to impact. It was now or never. She grabbed her sidearm, her boots thundering across the deck as she made her way toward the hangar. "We're going in," Lila said, turning to her crew. "The rest of you hold the line. We've got one shot at this." They didn't have time to wait for confirmation. Lila, with a small squad of hand-picked soldiers, rushed toward the ship's boarding pods. They would enter the flagship directly through its weak points, just as the charge was set to go off. It was a last-ditch gamble, but there was no other option. The door to the alien flagship's main chamber crashed open with a violent clang. Lila and her team poured into the corridor, guns raised, the faint hum of alien technology reverberating through the walls. The ship was alive, its energy running like blood through its veins, and Lila felt every pulse in her bones. "They'll be here in minutes," Sergeant Klein muttered, his rifle raised, eyes scanning the corridors for any signs of movement. "Stay sharp," Lila replied, her voice steady but commanding. "We make it to the core, and we win this. We don't make it." She didn't finish the sentence. They didn't have the luxury of weakness. The alien security systems kicked into overdrive, and the first wave of defense drones emerged from hidden compartments in the walls. Lila didn't hesitate. She fired, her shots piercing the drone's armor, sending sparks flying through the air. The hallway ahead darkened, the flickering lights revealing more drones, more heavily armored alien soldiers. The team moved forward, Lila leading the charge. It was a brutal, bloody battle, but humanity was used to fighting for survival. The deeper they went, the more intense the resistance became. Finally, they reached the heart of the flagship, a massive chamber housing the core. It pulsed with energy, a swirling mass of light and power. Lila's eyes locked on it. "We do this now!" she shouted, the fire in her voice unmistakable. Klein planted the explosives at the core's base as Lila and the others held the line. The alien forces were closing in, but they didn't care. This was the moment they'd been waiting for. The countdown clock ticked down, 5 seconds. "Ready!" Klein yelled. "Do it!" Lila ordered. With a single push, the core's energy field destabilized. The room exploded in a burst of light as the flagship shuddered violently, the core rupturing with a deafening roar. Lila's team barely had time to react before the shockwave sent them flying backward. The explosion tore through the flagship like a living thing, and in an instant, everything changed. Lila awoke to the sound of distant alarms and the heavy hum of energy fading away. She pulled herself to her feet, shaking off the impact as she surveyed the damage. The flagship was still intact, barely. The shockwave had crippled its systems, and the alien forces were in disarray. The battle was far from over, but the aliens were on the back foot now. "We did it!" Harris's voice crackled through her comms, relief and disbelief in his words. "The flagship's gone. They're retreating." Lila stood tall, looking at the chaos around her. The final blow had been struck. Humanity had taken its place in the galaxy, and they would never again be underestimated. "We've won the first round," she said, her voice steady but filled with conviction. "But the war has just begun, and humanity would be ready for whatever came next." The echo of the alien flagship's destruction reverberated through the emptiness of space, and with it, a silence unlike any Lila Vega had ever felt. The battlefield was a war-torn canvas, debris from shattered ships, clouds of smoke and vaporized metal, and the flickering remnants of systems that had once been mighty. Yet in that silence, humanity had found a singular truth: they had struck the first blow, and it had not gone unnoticed. Lila stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, watching as the last vestiges of the alien fleet scattered into the void. Some retreated, others crumbled, unable to sustain the chaos their leadership had failed to contain. But Lila knew this wasn't over. This was only the beginning. "Commander," Harris's voice broke through the tension. "We've lost 30% of our fleet, but we've taken down the flagship. The remaining alien ships are in disarray. They're retreating." Lila turned toward him, her gaze steely. "We can't let them regroup. Not after this." She tapped a few commands into her console, bringing up the remaining forces. The human fleet was battered, their resources stretched thin, but they had one advantage left: their will to fight. They wouldn't stop until every alien force had been pushed out of their galaxy. The screen flickered to life, showing a holographic image of the alien warlord that had been orchestrating this madness, a cruel, calculating figure by the name of Drazg. His image was now a ghost, his flagship destroyed, his army scattering, but the threat remained. He wasn't going to fade quietly into the shadows. "Track their movements," Lila ordered, her voice calm but determined. "Where are they headed?" The display zoomed out to reveal the remaining enemy ships, heading toward a nearby star system. Lila's eyes narrowed. Drazg was retreating, but he wasn't surrendering. He was regrouping, preparing for the inevitable counterattack. The tournament might have been a staged spectacle for the aliens, but now, it was their means of survival. "We're following them," she said, her words firm. "The fight's not over. They will regroup, and if we don't stop them now, we risk everything. We finish this." The Vanguard sped toward the star system, the human fleet following close behind. The journey was silent, filled only with the hum of the ship's engines. Lila leaned forward, her elbows resting on the console as she watched the alien ships disappear into the distant system. She wasn't sure what to expect. Every plan, every strategy, had come down to this moment. If they failed here, humanity's victory would be nothing but a fleeting memory. "We've reached their coordinates," Harris reported, his voice laced with tension. "The alien ships are entering the gravitational pull of a nearby gas giant. They're preparing to launch reinforcements." Lila's heart sank. "Prepare for battle. We're going in." The Vanguard dropped out of hyperspace with a violent shudder, entering the gas giant's orbit. The alien forces had dug in, but they weren't expecting humanity to follow them. The fight was going to be brutal. Drazg was no fool. He had chosen this battleground for a reason. The swirling atmosphere and intense gravitational pull made it nearly impossible to track incoming ships. But Lila wasn't about to let that stop her. "All units, engage at full throttle!" Lila commanded, her voice echoing through the ship's speakers. "Take no prisoners. This is our final stand." The human fleet entered the storm of debris and swirling clouds, the alien ships now visible in the distance. Drazg's fleet had settled near the planet's rings, using the debris field to their advantage. Lila knew they had to engage quickly. If they hesitated, they'd be swallowed by the chaos of the gas giant's atmosphere. The battle was fierce. Alien ships emerged from the swirling clouds, their weapons blazing. Lila's heart pounded in her chest as the Vanguard and its fleet weaved through the debris, dodging blasts and returning fire. She was in the thick of it, leading the charge with unwavering resolve. "Incoming from the right!" shouted Lieutenant Soren. Lila gritted her teeth as she fought to keep the ship steady. Alien missiles streaked toward them, and in the next instant, the Vanguard was rocked by an explosion that sent shockwaves through the ship. The lights flickered, and alarms blared. "Shields at 30%, Harris reported, his voice strained. "We've lost 2 cruisers already. The fleet's taking heavy casualties." Lila's knuckles whitened as she gripped the armrest of her chair. She wasn't going to let it end like this. She couldn't. "Status on Drazg's flagship?" she demanded. "Target locked," Harris replied. "It's making its way toward the center of the rings. We're losing him in the debris." Lila's eyes sharpened. "Get us close. We end this now." With calculated precision, the Vanguard plunged into the debris field. The alien flagship loomed ahead, massive and deadly, its energy weapons charging for another devastating attack. Lila's ship surged forward, dodging the wreckage around them. The alien fleet was closing in on all sides, but Lila wasn't backing down. "We're going in hot," Lila muttered, her fingers flying across the controls. "Prepare the secondary torpedoes. We take that flagship out, and the rest will follow." The Vanguard rocketed toward the enemy flagship, dodging more blasts as it cut through the debris storm. Lila could see the alien warship's weapons charging, but there was no turning back now. It was time to end this. "Deploy torpedoes," she commanded. The Vanguard released its payload, a barrage of high-energy torpedoes that streaked through space, aimed directly at the alien flagship's power core. The torpedoes hit their mark with surgical precision. The flagship shuddered, its shields buckling under the pressure. Drazg's forces tried to retaliate, but the human fleet was already on top of them, fighting with the ferocity of a species that had no other option but to survive. Then, the explosion. The flagship erupted in a brilliant flash of light, a shockwave that rippled through the gas giant's rings. The enemy ships scattered, some destroyed in the aftermath, others fleeing into the depths of space. Lila's breath caught in her chest as she watched the flagship disintegrate, its debris scattering across the battlefield. It was over. For now. The aftermath of the battle was a grave silence. The once mighty alien fleet was in ruins, their command shattered. The human fleet had taken heavy losses, but they had won. Humanity had stood up, defied the odds, and claimed victory. Lila stood on the bridge, her eyes reflecting the flickering light of the debris field outside. The battle had been won, but the war was not over. She turned to Harris, who stood by her side, looking at the wreckage. "We've won this round," she said, her voice steady but filled with determination. "But there's still more to come." And with that, she knew that humanity's place among the stars had been secured, not as a prize, but as a force to be reckoned with. The battlefield was a graveyard of twisted metal, drifting slowly in the orbit of the gas giant. Humanity's fleet had sustained heavy losses, but they were still standing. Lila Vega stood at the command deck of the Vanguard, watching the wreckage of the alien flagship burn slowly in the distance. The victory felt hollow. Every loss was a reminder of the cost of their survival. Every alien ship they had destroyed was one more piece of the puzzle, but the war was far from over. Her crew worked in silence, the hum of the ship's systems the only sound, as if the very ship was mourning the dead. The air felt thick with unspoken words. Lila couldn't remember the last time she'd been this exhausted, this worn. It had been a victory, yes, but they had been pushed to the edge, and humanity was still a target in the eyes of the galaxy. Lila's fingers drummed on the console in front of her, her eyes scanning the tactical readouts. Alien forces were scattered across the system, but there was something else she couldn't shake. A gnawing feeling at the back of her mind. Drazk's death had been a blow to the enemy's morale, but it wasn't enough. There were other warlords, other factions, waiting in the wings. "Commander, you're needed in the briefing room." Harris's voice came over the comms, snapping her from her thoughts. "It's urgent." Lila's brow furrowed. "On my way." The briefing room was cold, sterile, the flickering light of the holographic maps casting long shadows over the faces of her senior officers. They were all here, Mathis, Harris, Soren, and several other key members of the command staff. But there was no celebration. No cheers. Only the quiet understanding that the battle for humanity's future was far from over. "Report," Lila said, her voice sharp, demanding. Harris stepped forward, a dark look on his face. "We've been monitoring the communications from the surviving alien factions. There's been a shift. Drazk's death has created a power vacuum, and the tournament's organizers are reorganizing their forces. We're seeing more and more alien species rallying together, seemingly under a new banner. They're not backing down." Lila felt a pang of frustration. "A new coalition. Great." She crossed her arms, her mind working furiously. "What about the rest of Drazk's fleet? Is there any sign of reinforcements?" Mathis spoke up. "The remaining alien ships are scattered, some retreating, others trying to regroup. We've taken out most of their command structure, but without Drazk, they're trying to salvage what they can from the wreckage. It's going to take them time to recover." Lila nodded, her thoughts racing. Time. Humanity had no more time to waste. They couldn't afford to let the aliens regroup. They needed to strike now, while the momentum was on their side. "What about the tournament organizers themselves?" Lila asked, her eyes narrowing. "What's their next move?" Soren stepped forward, his voice quiet but firm. "The tournament isn't just a contest for glory. It's a business. A way to determine control over the galaxy's resources. If we don't shut it down completely, they'll just keep coming. The only way to end this is to take the heart of the tournament, the central command station, where all the decisions are made." Lila's eyes flicked over to the map. The central station was located in a neutral zone, a heavily fortified area where the tournament's highest-ranking officials operated. It was a fortress, surrounded by layers of security, and any attempt to breach it would be met with overwhelming resistance. "Then that's where we go," Lila said firmly. "If we're going to end this, we need to go straight to the source. We dismantle the tournament, destroy their infrastructure, and put an end to this charade once and for all." The room fell silent as her words settled in. The plan was risky, too risky, but Lila knew there was no other option. The alien factions were regrouping, and their desire to use humanity as a prize would only intensify if they weren't stopped now. "I'll prepare the fleet," Harris said after a beat. "But we'll need more than just firepower. We need to outsmart them. We'll have to strike fast and hit hard." Lila nodded. "I don't need to remind you all what's at stake. This isn't just about the survival of humanity. It's about showing the galaxy that we will never be subjugated. We will never be anyone's prize." She paused, her eyes scanning the faces of her team. This will be our final mission. If we succeed, we end this war. If we fail. She let the words hang in the air. Failure wasn't an option. Not now. The vanguard and the remaining human fleet prepared for their final assault. The atmosphere was heavy with the knowledge that this was it, the moment where everything would either fall into place or shatter. Lila stood in the command center, her eyes focused on the tactical map as the fleet moved into position. "We've got one shot at this," she said, her voice steady. "No turning back once we engage. We take out their central station, and we shut down the tournament for good." Harris was at her side, checking the status of the fleet's systems. "Everything's set. The rest of the fleet is ready for the assault." "Good," Lila said, turning to face him. "Let's end this." The vanguard led the charge into the heart of the enemy's territory. The final assault was brutal, the air thick with tension and energy. The alien defenses were formidable, but humanity had the advantage of desperation, of knowing they had nothing left to lose. They fought with everything they had, every gun, every ship, every soldier. Lila's heart pounded as she watched the central command station come into view, a massive structure looming in space, surrounded by layers of force fields and turrets. It was the beating heart of the tournament, and Lila was about to tear it out. "Prepare for entry," Lila said, her voice low, filled with resolve. "This is it." As the vanguard and the fleet descended toward the station, a final wave of alien ships emerged, their weapons firing with deadly precision. The battle was fierce. Blasts lit up the dark expanse of space, ships collided, and debris rained down. Lila's ship was rocked by explosions, but she remained focused, her eyes locked on the target ahead. "Almost there," Harris reported. "We're breaking through their defenses." The countdown began. The vanguard made its final approach, cutting through the alien forces like a knife through butter. The human fleet was relentless, pushing forward despite the odds. And then, with a deafening roar, the central station's shields fell, and Lila's fleet was inside. The final moments were a blur of chaos. Lila and her team fought their way through the station's core, taking down alien soldiers, disabling key systems, and planting explosives in strategic locations. Every step was a risk, every move a gamble. At the heart of the station, Lila stood in front of the central control panel. She hesitated for a moment, knowing that pressing the button would be the final act of defiance. The aliens had created the tournament to control the galaxy. But now, humanity would take control. With one decisive motion, she hit the button. The explosion was deafening, the station erupting in a brilliant flash of light as the core detonated. The tournament's infrastructure was gone. The war was over. And humanity had claimed its place in the galaxy, not as a prize but as the victor. As the human fleet regrouped, Lila stood on the bridge of the asterisk van. Humanity had won.